Trains magazine is the most widely read railroad magazine in the world. But more than that, what we try to do is make Trains the best general interest railroad magazine that anyone can find. Best writing, best photography, a look at the past, a look at railroad history, but also lots of information on current events, railroad news, that sort of thing. Why Trains on Location? Well, a big part of what's in the magazine is our reporting and our photography on railroad operations, mainly freight operations, but also passenger trains, commuter lines, that sort of thing. It's been a mainstay in the magazine for decades, and we thought with the video what we could really do is bring that whole railroad operations thing to life through the medium of the video.
What I like about shooting these shows is that I love trains. I've been shooting trains pretty much all my life, ever since I could first hold a camera, and it's just one of my favorite things to do. When we shoot these programs, we do a lot more than just go trackside and drop the camera next to the tracks and hit the record button. Trains prides itself on excellent photography. It's very important to them, and I like to bring the same quality to the videos. For most rail fans, one of the most interesting things about railroading is what's up front, the locomotives. And I'm certainly one of them. I'm a huge diesel fan. And in each one of our Train on Location shows, we try and devote a section of the show to the rolling stock, to the locomotives.
One of the things we think sets our On Location series apart is the way in which we try to tell a story in each tape. And there's a beginning and there's an end, and there's lots of little stories within the main story as we try to tell people what's wonderful about the places we go, the trains we see, the railroaders we talk to, and really make it an experience that's fulfilling in the way that only a great documentary can do.
We go out into the field with our fingers crossed, armed with as much information as we can, and spend about anywhere from 8 to 12 days in the location and shoot as much as we can. We know that we want to cover this piece of railroad, and I have sort of a concept in my head going out there, what do we want the show to be. But the shows often take left turns, and it ends up being something really different and really surprising.
I think Kevin brings credibility to the show. Unlike having a standard voice talent in the show, it brings a more personal element to it. He's the editor, he's sort of the man behind the scenes, and I think the viewer probably is able to relate to him a little bit better because he has a better understanding of trains and what's going on, as opposed to somebody who's just reading the script.
East of here, the railroad has a personality of switch runs, transfer runs, freight classification, but west of here, that's where the high-speed action really begins.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's whoever thought of, cutting these huge, massive, sometimes gorgeous trains to, either rock or classical or, different styles of music.
A big part of each program are the animated maps we use, which are created by Julie Mainwood. In all our shows, we cover anywhere from 30 to 200 miles of railroad, and these maps are used throughout the program so viewers always know where they are. The tapes have attracted a lot of attention. Certainly they've been well received in the railfan community, but we've also won 5 Telly Awards. The Telly series is a series of awards in the non-broadcast specialty video field. And we're very proud of the fact that 5 of our tapes have been given Tellys. One of our Telly Award winners was our tape on Sand Patch, the CSX crossing of the Alleghenies in Maryland and south central Pennsylvania. And I think one of the reasons we won the Telly Award there was because we had a nice way of blending together historical black and white photographs, interviews with some people like historian John Hankey, who told us a lot about the area. We visited the Mance Training Camp, which is an informal gathering place for rail fans in the area. We talked with an operator in one of the CSX interlocking towers on the line. Weaving all these elements together really told a story, and I think that's what made the difference in the awards. As executive producer of this series, one of the fun things is to get together with the train staff and watch a new show and To be honest with you, we really get a kick out of it. We hope viewers do too. Hi, I'm Kevin Keefe, editor of Trains Magazine, and welcome to Hudson River Thunder, the latest in our on-location video documentary series about great train watching spots around North America. In this program, we actually feature two tapes in one. You'll see CSX freight trains on the west shore of the Hudson River, and also see Amtrak passenger trains and Metro North commuter trains on the east shore. We'll take you to such popular train watching locations as Poughkeepsie, Bear Mountain Bridge, and Breakneck Mountain. And watch for more in our on-location series, direct from the pages of Trains Magazine. And now, Hudson River Thunder. Life, we're told, is a series of compromises. For Eastern rail fans, the choice is often between freight and passenger trains. For example, CSX's Sand Patch grade features a slew of freights between Cumberland and the top of the grade at Sand Patch, Pennsylvania. But only one passenger train crosses here, Amtrak's Capital Limited. It's a different story on Amtrak's Northeast Corridor. Here, a smattering of mostly local freights fade in the face of passenger trains operated by Amtrak and various commuter railroads. But there is one place in the East where you can have your cake and eat it too. Here, a legendary river snakes through some of the most beautiful scenery in the East. Long, heavy freights rumble up and down the west shore of the river. Commuter and intercity passenger trains race up and down the east shore. And when it all comes together, what you have is nothing less than Hudson River Thunder. Long before the railroads, long before the communities the railroads nurtured along the river, there was the river itself. The Hudson is an ancient waterway whose beginnings go back 75 million years. As great rivers go, the Hudson is relatively small. From its source near Lake Champlain in the Adirondack Mountains, the river runs a mere 315 miles to New York City in the Atlantic Ocean. Compare that to the Mississippi River, which spans 2,348 miles. But the Hudson makes up for its size with incomparable scenery, providing rail fans with one of the most beautiful backdrops in the East. The Hudson secured its place in American history when Henry Hudson sailed as far north as Albany, New York, mistakenly thinking the river led to the Orient. To colonists in the 18th century, control of the river meant control of the country. As a result, 1/3 of the battles fought during the American Revolution occurred along the Hudson's shores. With the opening of the Erie Canal in the 19th century, New York City evolved as the economic center of the nation. The steamboat got its start here when Robert Fulton sailed the Clermont from New York to Albany in 32 hours. Spurred by the new technology, cities arose, grew, and prospered. Trade flourished. And then came the railroads. The routes of two of the early railroads to serve New York City remain in service today. CSX's River Line on the west bank and Metro-North Railroad's Hudson Line on the east bank. We begin where the Hudson River ends, New York City. From Grand Central Terminal, we'll ride a Metro-North train to Croton-on-Hudson, site of Metro-North's Harmon Equipment Maintenance Facility. We'll head north on the Hudson Line to Peekskill, a gateway to the scenic Hudson Highlands. We'll continue through Garrison, Cold Spring, and Beacon. Then we'll pause at Poughkeepsie, the north end of Metro-North's service. A subsidiary of New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority, Metro-North is one of the largest commuter railroads in the United States. It was created in 1983 to assume Conrail commuter operations out of Grand Central. Metro-North directly operates 305 route miles in Connecticut and New York, including the 74-mile-long Hudson Line between New York's Grand Central and Poughkeepsie. Power for Metro-North's Hudson Line trains are P-32 AC-DM locomotives built by General Electric, commonly known as Genesis units or P-32s. Unlike conventional diesels, these are dual-mode units that operate on third-rail electric power south of Croton. The reason? An 1858 city ordinance that prohibits smoke-producing locomotives from operating into New York City. The AC in the model designation stands for AC traction. Unlike the DC motors found in older diesels, AC traction motors deliver improved performance with fewer moving parts, which results in lower maintenance costs. Metro-North commuter trains operate in push-pull mode. Heading north to Poughkeepsie, the locomotive leads. In the opposite direction, the locomotive pushes. The car leading the train south has a control cab that allows the engineer to control the locomotive at the other end. Push-pull operation saves Metro-North the time and expense of turning the train around at Poughkeepsie for the trip south to New York. Metro-North shares the Hudson Line with Amtrak, which handles all inner-city passenger trains in the U.S. One of those trains is the Lakeshore Limited, which uses the Hudson Line on its journey between New York and Chicago. The Hudson Line also sees Amtrak's Empire service trains. Expanding on a service created by Conrail predecessor New York Central in 1967, Empire service consists of frequently scheduled trains between New York and Albany, with several trains continuing west to Buffalo and one to Toronto. Other Amtrak intercity trains include service to Rutland, Vermont, and Montreal, Quebec. In 1991, Amtrak shifted all Empire service and long-distance trains to Penn Station. Like Metro-North, Amtrak uses dual-mode Genesis units on its Hudson Line trains. Amtrak also operates a rebuilt Roar RTL Turboliner, affectionately known as the Worm. The train set was the subject of a $2 million rebuild in 1994 to enable it to reach speeds of 125 miles per hour. The freight train generally seen during daylight hours on this portion of the Hudson Line is this CSX local. To simplify switching en route, the local rates a second locomotive at the rear of the train. A set out at Croton North gives us a chance to check out the local's power, a pair of GE B23-7s. These are four-motor units rated at 2,250 horsepower, ideal for light road switching duties. They're assigned for maintenance to Selkirk Yard near Albany, where GEs have long been common on Conrail switch and local jobs. To see more freights than the local on the Hudson Line, we'll cross the river at Poughkeepsie to hook up with CSX's River Line at Highland, New York. From there, we'll head south to Newburgh and Cornwall to West Point, where the railroad tunnels under the U.S. Military Academy. We'll continue through Highland Falls, Fort Montgomery, and Haverstraw. Then we'll skip ahead to the end of the line, CSX's Freight and Intermodal Yard in North Bergen, New Jersey. CSX is the latest of several railroads to operate on the west shore of the Hudson. Long before intermodal trains and diesels were even thought of, the New York, West Shore, and Buffalo started as a rival to New York Central predecessor New York Central and Hudson River in the 1880s. The Central acquired the West Shore when the construction company that built it went bankrupt. In 1968, New York Central vanished into Penn Central. 8 years later, PC joined 5 other bankrupt northeastern railroads to form Conrail. In June 1999, the West Shore route passed into CSX's hands when Conrail was sold and divided between CSX and Norfolk Southern. Despite the CSX takeover, the River Line still sees plenty of Conrail units, including this comfort cab-equipped 6-motor GE on an intermodal train at Newburgh. CSX's own GE units include standard cab C40-8s, such as this unit headed south at West Point. Even more common are comfort cab GEs, including this massive AC6000 headed south through Highland Falls. You'll often see Conrail and CSX units in the same power consist, sometimes with lease units from Helm Leasing. For many years, New York City believed it didn't need railroads. Unlike Philadelphia and Baltimore, it was right on the ocean. What's more, the Hudson River was navigable for 150 miles upstream, unlike the rivers around Boston. In conjunction with the Erie Canal, the Hudson channeled all the commerce of the West right down to New York. There was just one problem. Both waterways froze solid in winter. The solution was the Hudson River Railroad, organized by Poughkeepsie interests in 1847. 20 years later, financier Cornelius Vanderbilt folded it into the New York Central and Hudson River, later to be known as the New York Central System. Vanderbilt wanted a magnificent station for his railroad in New York City, a depot to bear the name Grand Central. In truth, the 2-level building that stands today on 42nd Street replaced the original Grand Central Depot, built in 1871. But that doesn't diminish its significance as America's premier railroad terminal. High above the 42nd Street main entrance stands the sculpture group Transportation. Created by Jules Couthon and installed in 1914, it shows the gods Minerva, Mercury, and Hercules. At their feet sits a monumental clock with a diameter of 13 feet. Officially opened on February 2, 1913, Grand Central is considered an architectural triumph. Its main concourse measures 300 feet long, 120 feet wide, and 125 feet high, with a Tennessee marble floor. Many of the terminal's more than 10,000 panes of glass can be found in its dramatically arched windows, which measure 33 feet by 60 feet. The famous information booth, with its gold clock, remains a favorite meeting place.
Okay. And is Croton Falls down at the Brewster North?
Yes, Croton Falls is over here.
Okay.
You can take any one of these trains that have time down here.
Okay, and is it about like approximately a half an hour ride?
The subtle elegance of Grand Central's suburban concourse disguises the problems the builders faced when they began construction in 1903. Building Grand Central required digging deep into the bedrock below Manhattan to bring the track to an average depth of 30 feet below street level. Despite the upheaval, rail service continued uninterrupted. Grand Central Terminal hosted one of the most famous trains in America, New York Central's 20th Century Limited. In 1947, over 65 million rail passengers, the equivalent of 40% of the United States, moved through Grand Central. The terminal you see today is the result of a total revitalization plan implemented by Metro-North and MTA, which owns the building. The restoration, which started in 1996, included the cleaning and replating of the original chandeliers. On the verge of the millennium, Grand Central Terminal stands to regain its position as New York's premier meeting, shopping, dining, and transportation hub. A hub of a different sort can be found on the 6th floor of the terminal, the location of Metro-North's Operations Control Center. Here, 10 dispatchers on first and second shift handle 550 passenger trains a day. Metro-North operates as far as New Haven, Connecticut, plus 3 branches in that state. A ride on Metro-North train 829 out of Grand Central at 12:56 p.m. gave us a first-hand look at a less visible part of the terminal. When the New York Central built the new station, it depressed and decked over the tracks along Park Avenue. It also electrified the 4-track main line to Croton on Hudson. Chief Engineer William Wilgus proposed that real estate developers be allowed to erect buildings over the concealed tracks, a concept that came to be known as air rights. Combined with a tunnel built earlier between the original Grand Central and 96th Street, the result was the 2-mile-long Park Avenue Tunnel. With Grand Central acting as an anchor, skyscrapers and hotels took root above the central tracks under Park Avenue.
Protected by automatic train control. All these have to apply the brakes in suppression, and they have to stay there until it gets down to 45 miles an hour. He'll get a flashing overspeed light on his control panel.
I can see light shining through here. I guess you sometimes get snow down here.
Yeah, actually, the center tracks, which are we're on track 2. The far track over is 3. They're out of service.
Daylight greets us as we leave the tunnel for the Park Avenue Viaduct. This is trackage elevated on a fill through 40 blocks of Manhattan streets.
Again, you can't actually change over until you get about 880 RPMs.
Then we slow for our 1:07 p.m. stop at 125th Street station in Harlem. The journey north to Croton gave us time to reflect on the history of the line. Poughkeepsie interests organized the Hudson River Railroad over the protests of the steamboat operators, the New York and Harlem, and those who said the railroad would destroy the beauty of the river. The railroad's answer to the last protest was that it would smooth off all the points sticking out into the river. The tracks would also even up the shoreline and bring a nice symmetry to it. The New York and Harlem had already staked out the middle of Manhattan, so the Hudson River Railroad built its line along the west side of the island. It intended to use steam as far south as 32nd Street, then horses. Construction began at the south end of the line, and by the end of 1849, an almost gradeless double-track railroad with only the gentlest of curves connected New York with Poughkeepsie, essentially the same route used by today's Hudson line.
Take them down a little Italy, Howard.
Our cab ride ends 32 miles north of Grand Central at Croton-on-Hudson in New York's Westchester County. The station and shop buildings here sit on land donated by developer Clifford Harmon in the 1920s. Harmon had one stipulation, however. His name must always be on the train station. To that end, the railroad named the shops after Harmon and dubbed the station Croton-Harmon. After electrification was completed in 1913, Harmon served as the dividing line between the Central's electrified division and the steam-powered Hudson division. All through trains changed engines here, a process that took 4 minutes according to a 1947 NYC timetable. Dual-mode diesels eliminated the engine swap at Harmon years ago, but Harmon remains a busy place. We suspect the yardmaster here is seldom bored.
And like I said to John,
Passengers also change trains at Croton-Harmon. The face of a cab car heralds the arrival of a southbound local train at the station. After it stops, a handful of passengers simply cross the platform to an express train. Even with the time it takes to change trains, the express will get them into New York City faster. For most commuters, that's what riding Metro North is all about: speed, comfort, and convenience. The parked cars in the Croton-Harmon parking lot represent a fraction of the more than 200,000 customer trips made on Metro North each weekday. Metro North's locomotive fleet consists of more than just Genesis units. Number 102 is a former Conrail GP35 built by General Motors' Electromotive division, known as EMD. Conrail's Juniata shop yanked the turbocharger and rebuilt the engine to 2,000 horsepower. Metro North mainly uses the 102 and other EMD road switchers for work train service. Unit 605 is a rebuild of a different sort. Originally an Alco RS3, the unit was rebuilt by Conrail with a 12-cylinder EMD engine rated at 1,000 horsepower. It serves as the Harmon shop switcher. EMD FL9s powered most Metro North diesel trains before the first Genesis units arrived in 1995. Built for the New Haven Railroad between 1956 and 1960, the FL9 is a dual-mode unit equipped to run on the same 600-volt DC third rail as the P32 AC-DMs. To reduce the weight on each axle on the Park Avenue viaduct, the builder used a 3-axle Flexicoil truck. The front truck's also a Flexicoil truck to allow room for the third rail shoe. "14 FL9s survive in 1999, mostly for service on Metro North New Haven lines and the Harlem lines to Brewster and White Plains, New York. A handful of units belong to the Connecticut Department of Transportation and wear New Haven colors. The paint scheme honors the railroad that operated those lines prior to 1969. Number 2002 is also one of 10 units rebuilt by contract locomotive shop Morrison Knudsen between 1993 and 94. 2044 is a rebuild of a different sort, an FL9 AC-DM from ABB Traction. In place of its original 16-cylinder 1,800 horsepower engine, it boasts a 12-cylinder EMD engine rated at 3,200 horsepower. Metro North originally planned to convert its entire fleet of FL9s to FL9 ACs, but the 7 ABB units failed to live up to the railroad's expectations, to put it kindly. Even today, reliability problems require the FL9 ACs to operate in pairs on the Hudson line. During our visit, we saw several FL9s on the Hudson line. Well, that's not entirely true. In fact, what we saw were a string of retired FL9s parked on a yard track in Croton North, 2 miles north of Croton-Harmon Station. You might not know it from its faded paint and rusted sheet metal, but Metro North 2033 is the last FL9 built. But the 2033 is more than just a footnote. It signifies the end of an era, a heady time that began with the first EMD FT demonstrator in 1939 and ended with 7,620 F units built. By the time the 2033 was built in November 1960 as New Haven 2059, the dieselization of America was largely a done deal. And that, if you ask us, makes 2033 the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence, the last line in one of the most important chapters in the history of American railroading, rust and all. Although the Croton North Depot may be less significant than the 2033, it's another link to the Hudson Line's past. Apparently the town feels that way. Plans are underway to turn it into a museum. In the meantime, the station offers a wonderful backdrop for train watching. Depending on which direction you're coming from, Peekskill is a gateway to the Hudson Highlands. The Highlands are a 15-mile stretch of the river that hasn't changed much since the days of Henry Hudson. The highest mountain on the river is here, and the Hudson reaches its greatest depth as well. All the mountains in the area are so steeply sloped that building development is almost impossible, something to cheer about. In terms of history and nature, this is a magnificently complex region, and it's also a great place just to kick back and watch trains. A stone milepost marker that looks to us like a tombstone tells us Garrison is 50 miles from New York City. The tracks here look like something you'd find on an American Flyer toy train layout. The southbound track dives through a short tunnel, while the northbound whips around to the east. Track work on the northbound puts northbound traffic on the wrong main, one of the benefits of centralized traffic control. Most of the time, Hudson Line trains operate on the right-hand track, typical of most North American railroads, with the notable exception of the old Chicago and Northwestern and the Duluth, Mesabi, and Iron Range. Founded in the 18th century, Cold Spring reportedly got its name from George Washington's comment on the water found at a local spring. Like almost every small town in this part of New York State, it contains at least one pizzeria. Cold Spring Pizza, opened in 1972, tempted us on more than one occasion. Even more appealing is the Cold Spring Depot restaurant at 1 Railroad Avenue. At one time, the 1893 depot was the river terminus for the old Toll Turnpike, now Route 301. Reborn as a casual restaurant, it turned out to be an ideal place to indulge in two of our favorite pastimes, watching trains and dining. Trains roll across a causeway north of town like actors on a stage. Across the river from Cold Spring stands Storm King Mountain, allegedly named for the turbulent weather in the area. The haze we encountered during our visit comes from forest fires started because of the drought, summer heat, and lightning. Almost undetected, the fire spread for miles on the ground before helicopters arrived to squelch the fire with water drawn from the river. The actual town of Storm King is on the Hudson line near the Breakneck Tunnels, twin concessions to the power of Bear Mountain. Bear Mountain was a formidable obstacle to the builders of the Hudson River Railroad. Faced with a wall of solid granite rock, workers dug an 800-foot tunnel using techniques developed by the Romans to build the water tunnels of Rome. The abandoned building near the north face of the tunnels is a bit of a mystery. Locals claim it was part of a dock for sightseeing boats. Riders would allegedly debark here for hiking tours on nearby Sugarloaf Mountain. Dusk paints the scene near the tunnels in warm light. The promise of capturing a dramatic image in this beautiful setting naturally draws railfan photographers. The procession of early evening trains here is nothing new. Even in New York Central days, the Hudson Division was primarily a passenger railroad. One local businessman had a shorter commute from New York than most. Francis Bannerman was a dealer in surplus U.S. Army and Navy equipment. At age 14, young Francis bought up most of the munitions captured in the Spanish-American War. As a home for his munitions business, he picked a 7-acre island in the river. There, he dredged out a small harbor and built his arsenal. Then he decided to build, as his summer home, a Scottish castle complete with a bridge over the moat. Trains on the Hudson Line offer a fine view of the castle. Although Bannerman died in 1918, before the house was finished, his family continued to summer on the island through the 1930s. Purchased by New York State in 1967, the island is part of the Hudson Highlands State Park. Today, cruise boats leave Newburgh Landing on the west bank of the river and travel to Bannerman Castle, which rises like a medieval mirage from the Hudson River. Metro-North's Beacon Station is anything but a dream, but it's a perfectly good place to watch a northbound Metro-North commuter train arrive, then depart behind the usual single Genesis diesel. The river is hard by the tracks here. Overcast skies drain the color from the water, drawing our eyes to the lily pads near the shore. They almost look solid enough to walk on, a green carpet that dares us to walk along the edge of the Hudson. A more realistic, not to mention solid path, is the nearby Beacon-Newburgh Highway Bridge, one of 3 river crossings on this part of the Hudson. $13 during rush hour brings you 74 miles from Grand Central Terminal to Poughkeepsie, the end of Metro-North's Hudson Line. The depot here may not be a medieval dream, but it's certainly more striking than most Hudson Line stations. The words New York Central dispel any question about the station's origins. Inside, the Poughkeepsie depot offers a touch of Grand Central elegance on a small-town scale. Another link to the past is the massive railroad bridge between Poughkeepsie and Highland. Built in 1889 by New Haven predecessor Central New England and Western, it connected with the Lehigh and Hudson River at Maybrook, New York. The bridge was important to both roads since the L&HR connected New Haven with the rest of the country via connections at Allentown, Pennsylvania and Port Morris, New Jersey. After the 1969 merger of New Haven into Penn Central, PC had access to both ends of the L&HR. Suddenly, the L&HR bridge route was redundant. The L&HR struggled on with its online traffic until May 8, 1974, when a fire damaged the Poughkeepsie Bridge. Suddenly, the Lehigh and Hudson River was a bridge route without a bridge. When L&HR and PC joined Conrail in 1976, the fate of the bridge looked uncertain at best. But local efforts kept the scrappers at bay long enough for New York State to turn the bridge into a historic landmark. The Poughkeepsie Bridge may eventually see service as a variety of tourist venues, such as a hiking trail or a trolley ride. Highland sits at the west end of the Poughkeepsie Bridge. If you ask us, the bridge makes a great frame for southbound CSX freights on the river line. There was no connection between New York Central trains on the West Shore and the New Haven at Highland. That's because the vertical separation between the two is 200 feet, clearly beyond the capability of this 4,000 horsepower C40-8 owned by locomotive leasing firm LMS. From America's earliest days, Newburgh, New York seemed destined for great things. At Washington's headquarters on 84 Liberty Street, General George Washington learned about the signing of the Treaty of Paris, which formally acknowledged the independence of the United States. Washington lived here from April 1782 to August 1783, waiting for the British to leave New York under the terms of surrender. The home and grounds were eventually required by the government in 1848 and became the first National Historic Site. At Newburgh, Erie Railroad branch lines from Gray Court and Harriman join the West Shore Line. A switch stand marks the north end of the sole surviving branch, known on Conrail as the Newburgh Industrial Track. The branch crosses the river line near the south end of town. A local freight operates on the 5.3-mile branch to reach customers at Vale's Gate. CSX freights duck under the Newburgh Industrial Track without so much as checking their speed. But in the days before the Poughkeepsie Bridge, Lehigh and Hudson River and Erie trains used the branch to reach the Newburgh car ferry. A relic from the car ferry survives at a private marina on Newburgh's riverfront. Rated at 15 tons, this wheel crane from the 19th century is among the largest hand-operated cranes built. It was used to lift freight from flat cars or gondolas for loading onto trucks or vice versa. Clearly, it's been years since the crane handled freight on the Newburgh riverfront, but at one time the crane and the railroad itself were vital to Newburgh's vitality.
When I was an 8, 9-year-old, the railroad was a really important means of transportation on the Hudson. So you could get the train in Hoboken, head north, and the little towns along the line were where all the shops were, and you'd move maybe 2 miles or a mile, and you'd stop. One little town, you'd move another 2 little miles, another stop. And coming into Newburgh was kind of interesting because it was like suddenly you were coming into kind of a haven. One little shop after another was the hub of shopping for a great many people, not only in Newburgh, but people in the surrounding towns used to hit the railroad, take the train into Newburgh, do their shopping, or walk the track. And it was one little shop after another, down Water Street and down Front Street. And the constant hustle and bustle. And right in the center of all of these small shops was the New York Central Railroad Station. And it was an important stop, an important destination, and for not only shopping, but also other activities in the Newburgh area.
In the post-war era, Americans largely abandoned passenger trains for private automobiles. As the stream of shoppers and visitors dried up, so did Newburgh.
Now it's like going into a desert. I mean, it's just has all been razed, all the stores gone. The attempt was to remodel and revitalize the area, and all it's done is paved it. It's desolate, and it's a shame. It once was the hub of activity and industry for the Newburgh area, and now it's nothing. It's actually barren. And that's a shame. That's a shame to experience that, to see it move from what it was.
Cornwall marks the north end of trackage built and jointly operated with another railroad, the 541-mile New York, Ontario and Western. Where exactly did the O&W connect with the West Shore? A southbound automobile train offered no clues. Still, it was fun to watch. Near the Cornwall Marina, we watched an intermodal train head north through town. Did the curve in the track mean anything? It wasn't enough to go on. But the concrete milepost marker we found near the CSX Maintainers Access Road was.
This is Cornwall on Hudson, New York, which is on the railroad is Cornwall, New York. Here is where the New York, Ontario, and Western tracks diverge from the New York Central. The New York Central is still in business today. The NYO&W was the first of the major railroads to be abandoned in 1957. We're standing basically on the right-of-way of the old O&W. The O&W was a charming railroad, and when it operated, the fans flocked to it because it was running old equipment. It was not doing too well financially, and when the rest of the world was running steel passenger cars and steel freight cars, the O&W was still running wooden box cars and truss-rotted passenger cars. The railroad was financially struggling through most of its existence. It dieselized early, and the dieselization saved it enough money that allowed it to continue until only 1957. It extended from the uppermost New York state at Lake Ontario, had a branch all the way to Scranton, Pennsylvania, to the anthracite fields, and the third line came all the way here to Cornwall. At Cornwall, its passenger trains ran all the way to New York City. The passenger trains came down the grade, right past us here, and down the New York Central West Shore line to Weehawken, New Jersey, where NYO&W passengers ferried across the Hudson River to New York City.
The marker shows 53 miles to New York. In truth, O&W and New York Central trains traveled to Weehawken, New Jersey. Little remains of the O&W today, least of all in Cornwall, but a scattering of ballast near the CSX Maintainers Road pointed us to a gap in the trees where the right-of-way must have gone. Sure enough, a single wood tie marked the location of the abandoned old and weary track, but that was nothing compared to the other relic we stumbled across, a massive concrete marker for the West Shore dated 1886. Author Vincent Scully, Jr. called Storm King a dome of living granite swelling with animal power. It's hard to believe it was originally called Butter Hill until a local writer-editor mounted a campaign to change its official name. Arguably, the best views of the Hudson Highlands is from an overlook on State Road 218, known as the Storm King Highway. A railroad causeway passes over a section of the river known as the Cove. The best place to enjoy the view is a tiny spot big enough for only a car or two at the highest point in the drive. And yes, it's a great place to watch trains. Situated on the bluffs overlooking the Hudson River, West Point Military Academy is where the nation's officers have been trained since 1802. With the onset of the Revolution, it was clear that the Hudson had to be secured against the British. George Washington concluded the best stronghold was at a narrow spot in the river known as West Point. It was the southernmost point at which cannonballs could be fired across the Hudson, a strong deterrent to any British ship attempting to reach Albany. Today, there are about 4,000 men and women at the Academy. With a tunnel under the Academy's parade grounds, we wonder how many of them notice the CSX freight trains that are literally underfoot. Highland Falls residents call their town a support town for West Point, a place for visitors to find gas, food, and lodging. But Highland Falls is more special than that. Like most rail fans, our first visit to town was at Trackside, where we saw this northbound merchandise freight. A few hundred yards north, we came across a rock cut that would make a model railroader proud. The scenery seemed to improve as we went, so we continued north. We weren't disappointed when we found this pin-connected truss bridge, typical of those from the turn of the century. It reminded us of the 1871 Bowman Bridge we found on Sand Patch, a former Baltimore and Ohio Railroad structure now used as a farm road bridge. We didn't think it could get much better than this, modern trains rolling through what we believed to be a turn-of-the-century bridge. Then we looked north and saw the station. The vision of Bannerman Castle was nothing compared to our first look at the Highland Falls station. Even more remarkable was the story of the people who live and work here.
Well, it was interesting here because I was here all my life. I used to live upstairs when it was still a working station downstairs. So we got to meet a lot of the agents, get to see what's going on daily, see the trains. I do remember steam. I sat into an engine cab with my father. I remember that one. And after that, the railroads died in the late 40s. I had a couple of agents just during the day, that was all. Then the freight business died. And they closed that down, and they closed the stations down. They just had an agent just to be here for a while. Then they got rid of them. Then they auctioned off the entire division. And my father was able to buy it at auction. And we lived upstairs, and we owned the whole place. In terms of keeping the building up, it's quite involved. It's a big old wooden structure. It takes a lot of maintaining, a lot of upkeep. We're currently in the process of doing the roof, getting it painted, and a lot of maintenance has got to be done on it. But it's worth doing. It's a historic place. It needs to be kept up. I mean, how many stations are there in this country that are still in existence, still look like they did? It's a residence currently. We got three apartments in there. But for the most part, it's about the same as it was when it was a station. Just slight modifications to make it livable. Well, other than that, it's changed very little. The waiting room the same as it was. Just the benches are gone. I wouldn't live anyplace else but on water. I'm a water person. I'm most at home in, on, or under it. And that's me. So no, I mean, life on land is dry. Let's face it. It doesn't cut it for me.
Okay, thank you very much. We will. Where is the Cornwall Marine Yacht Club over?
Tom and his wife Judy have done more than rehab the historic structure. Avid collectors, they've filled their home with Americana and antiques. We couldn't help but think of the Shady Rest Hotel in the old TV show Petticoat Junction. Only the river and the ducks in the front yard dispelled the notion that we were in Hooterville. No wonder Tom and Judy's home is a magnet for curious people.
Well, when I first came here, I just couldn't believe it. I'd never lived near a railroad station or tracks before, and took a while getting used to the noise. But as I say to everybody that says, how do you stand living here, it's a trade-off for the view that we have. And we do get to see some exciting things. We've seen all the tanks come back from Desert Storm, seen circus trains go by, and you just learn to live with it, same as living near a busy road or an airport. We get a lot of strange people wandering by here. We've had people demand to see our deed because they just didn't believe that they couldn't walk here, and people with children running around and dogs wandering around. Some of them, they just don't seem to understand, while it's a business, it's a private business in a private home, and they don't understand why they can't just walk around and go down on the docks. We've had people actually go on someone's boat just because they wanted to see it, and not realize that they weren't doing something they shouldn't be doing. All we recommend is that people do the polite thing, come and knock on the door and tell us who they are and what they'd like to do. You mind if we walk around and look around, that type of thing. Usually we say, no, we don't mind, but we don't like people walking on the docks with little children, or if it happens to be a rough day, because it is dangerous. And we really don't like people taking pictures of our home, because it is a private home, and you don't know where those pictures are going to end up or what the ultimate purpose might be. You hate to be suspicious, but in this day and age, sometimes you have to play it safe.
Once the site of a revolutionary fortress, Fort Montgomery was slated to become home to Sing Sing Prison. But public outcry and political pressure persuaded the state to locate the penitentiary across the river in Ossining, south of Croton. At Fort Montgomery, the river line passes under the Bear Mountain Bridge. From the north side of the bridge, an intermodal train headed south on the river line, 185 feet below. A relic from the bridge's past sits on the shore of the river near Russell's Marina. This covered barge once hauled cement to the construction site in 1924. When the job was finished, the barge was abandoned. We can only hope the same fate doesn't befall the river line anytime soon. At least one track no longer sees service at Fort Montgomery. This abandoned deck bridge indicates the path of a second main track. Like the northbound track at Garrison, it used to go around the mountain. The remaining track, on the other hand, simply bores through the mountain. Why do rail fans flock to the bird sanctuary on Iona Island? A visit to the popular train watching spot late on a summer afternoon showed us why. North Bergen Yard marks the southernmost terminal on CSX. South of here, Riverline freights enter the Shared Assets Area, a terminal area shared, as the name implies, with Norfolk Southern and CP Rail and governed by Conrail. Conrail used North Bergen as a base for local freights, a role the yard continues to play for CSX. The new owner also maintains the intermodal facility that Conrail built to handle piggyback traffic, known as TOFC, or trailer on flat car. We found both Conrail and CSX switchers when we visited North Bergen. CSX 6203 is a Jeep 40-2 built by EMD. A turbocharged 16-cylinder engine turns out 3,000 horsepower, more than enough for most local and switch jobs. Conrail's 7600 is another EMD product, a GP38 delivered to Penn Central in 1967. It's rated at 2,000 horsepower and lacks the turbocharger found in the 6203. One of the 7 tracks that make up the grade crossing here belongs to the New York, Susquehanna, and Western, known as the Suzy Q. Here, a low-nosed Jeep 18 runs backwards with a string of double-stacked cars bound for Little Ferry Yard. Looking down on North Bergen Yard is Bergen Hill, the ridge that separates the Hudson River from the marshy New Jersey meadows. Any railroad that wanted to reach the Hudson had to pierce this geological roadblock. New York Central bored a tunnel through it to reach milepost 0, otherwise known as Weehawken. The old West Shore Yard at Weehawken is gone now, replaced by a parking lot. From an overlooking Jersey City, we wondered what the yard was like in its heyday, but we didn't linger long. Hey, why mourn the past when the present offers the biggest show in the East, the trains of the Hudson River Valley?